My name is Emily Carter. I grew up in the busy city of Chicago, where life always moved at lightning speed. My father, Jonathan Carter, was a hard-working man who spent most of his life providing for our family. He was deeply respected in our neighborhood and had many old friends, most of whom had known him since his early college days. One of those friends was Michael Thompson. Michael lived in a quiet suburban area outside the city. He had always been close to my father, and because of that, he became like an extended uncle to me. But little did I know that one simple invitation to his house would change the way I looked at people and life forever. It all started on a cool Saturday morning. The leaves had begun to turn orange and red, and the air carried the sweet smell of fall. My father and Michael were talking on the phone in the living room. I overheard bits of their conversation, and then my father looked at me. "Emily," he said warmly, "Michael has invited us over to his house this afternoon. He hasn't seen you in a long time, and he wants to catch up. What do you say?" I smiled. "Sure, Dad. It'll be nice to see him again." Michael had always been kind to me growing up. He used to bring me little gifts on my birthdays and tell me inspiring stories about his travels. I thought of him as someone trustworthy and wise, so the idea of visiting his house seemed pleasant. That afternoon, my father and I drove out of the city and into the quiet suburbs. The streets were lined with maple trees, and the air felt fresher. Michael's house was beautiful, an old two-story home with a wide porch and big glass windows. He greeted us at the door with his usual cheerful smile. "Jonathan, Emily, I'm so glad you came," he said, giving my father a firm handshake and then turning to me with a kind smile. "Emily, you've grown so much. You look just like your mother did when she was your age." I thanked him, feeling a little shy. His words reminded me of my mom, who had passed away a few years ago. We went inside, and Michael's house felt warm and inviting. The walls were decorated with family photos, and the smell of freshly baked bread filled the air. His wife, Margaret, greeted us kindly and offered us tea. We sat in the living room and talked about old times, shared laughs, and enjoyed the homemade food. After a while, my father and Margaret began talking about something serious in the kitchen. Michael looked at me and said, "Emily, why don't you come with me? I want to show you something in my study." At first, I hesitated. Not because I didn't trust him, but because I was comfortable where I was. Still, I nodded politely and followed him down the hallway into a separate room. His study was filled with bookshelves, paintings, and old photographs. It had a nostalgic aura, as if every object inside carried a story. "Take a look at this," Michael said, pointing to an old framed photograph on the wall. It was of him and my father when they were young, standing together at their college graduation. "You see, Emily," he continued, "your father and I have been through so much together. We built our lives from nothing. And I always promised him that if he ever needed me, I'd be there for him and his family." I listened quietly as he shared stories of their struggles, how they supported each other, and how much respect he had for my father. Then, Michael turned serious. "Emily," he said, lowering his voice, "life will test you. You're young, and you'll face many choices that will shape your future. I wanted to bring you here today because I wanted you to understand something important. Trust is rare. True friendship is rare. Your father has been my truest friend, and I want you to know that no matter what happens, you can count on me if you ever need help." I felt a lump in my throat. No one had spoken to me like that in a long time. After losing my mom, I often felt like I had no one to guide me. My dad loved me dearly, but he was always busy working. Hearing Michael's words gave me a strange sense of reassurance. "Thank you," I whispered. He smiled kindly. "One day, Emily, you'll remember this talk. And I hope you'll make choices that honor the values your father raised you with." We stayed in the study for nearly an hour, as he told me about perseverance, kindness, and the importance of surrounding myself with good people. It wasn't the kind of conversation I expected, but it was one I needed. When we returned to the living room, my father was laughing with Margaret. He looked up at me and asked, "So, what did you and Michael talk about?" I just smiled and said, "He told me stories about you, Dad." "Good stories." My father chuckled. "Oh, I'm sure he did. That evening, when we drove back home, I felt different. Something about that separate room conversation stayed with me. It wasn't about secrets or anything inappropriate. It was about wisdom, guidance, and trust. In the weeks that followed, whenever I faced challenges at school or in my personal life, I remembered Michael's words. They gave me strength. They reminded me that real friends, the kind like my father and Michael, are treasures in life. Years later, when I graduated from college, Michael was there, standing beside my father with pride in his eyes. And I realized that the day he invited me into his house and spoke to me in that separate room wasn't just a random moment. It was a turning point, a moment that gave me clarity about life, trust, and the kind of person I wanted to become.